Welcome to Japan on Film podcast. I'm your host Perry Constantine, and today we've got another episode with a new guest, and that is LowRes. LowRes, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. So this is your first time on the show, and what I'd like to do with first-time guests is give them a chance to kind of introduce themselves to the audience and talk a little bit about what got them interested in Japanese cinema in the first place.
Sure. Well, I'm a director. I'm a writer. I do a podcast of my own called Movies, where we just kind of will riff about essentially any kind of film that catches our attention, whether that's something new or old or what have you. I have a YouTube channel that is probably what I'm most known for, where I do sketch comedy and also documentaries. I have a lot of different interests, so it doesn't all
Mhm.
mesh together under one thing. But yeah, I'm a creative person in general, is how I would put it.
So, what kind of movies have you directed? I know you mentioned documentaries, but what kind of other stuff?
Well, I've mainly directed a series. We did a sketch comedy series in 2019 called Comfort Systems, and we put out a special episode in 2020. Obviously,
Mhm.
things were bogged down because of the virus, so
Right.
our capabilities for that was fairly limited. But last year, I did manage to shoot what's going to be my first feature film, and that'll hopefully be out later this year,
Oh, great.
called Mass State Lottery,
Okay.
and I'm very excited about that. So hopefully we do get it out by what I'm eyeing is December 21st.
Do you want
Uh,
to talk a little bit about that? Tell people what it's about, or when they can
uh,
where they can expect to find it when it does come out.
Sure. Well, I mean, the plan for that is pretty fluid at the moment. We're
Hmm.
just gonna see whatever is most advantageous towards getting the film in front of as many eyes as possible. We do have a couple of people that are interested in picking it up, but nothing has been concrete as far as that goes. And as far as like a log line or something, it's about a private investigator who manipulates a grieving mother.
Oh.
That's just the only information about the movie that's out right now. That'll probably change in a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it'll be a weird movie. It'll be weird.
Do you have like I know you said it's fluid with the release and everything, but do you have
Yeah.
like a general idea of when it'll be coming out?
Yeah, again, we're gonna hopefully eye a release date of December 21st
Okay.
of this year. That could change. There's an IMDb page for Mass State Lottery if people want to check that out and give it a look and keep up to date with all that. There's going to be more information coming out probably next month. Next month
Okay.
is when the trailer and the posters and everything else will be coming out.
Okay, and so for those of you who are listening to the show, we record, about a few months in advance. So by the time you hear this, it'll probably be like late March or April. So that stuff should probably already be out then.
Okay, in that case, go to lowreswonderbread.net. There you go.
Okay.
And good luck with the spelling of that.
We'll make sure you email me a link afterwards, and I'll make sure to put it on the website as well. So you can go
Sure
to the
thing.
japanonfilm.com. You can find links for low res stuff and all the other guests who come on the show. Okay, so how about now Japanese cinema? How would you kind of get interested in Japanese movies?
So I'll, my main interest internationally in film was originally Korean films.
Hmm.
I got introduced to a lot of the foreign market that way, or specifically like the Asian market,
Hmm.
through movies like Old Boy and a lot of Park Chan Wook. Um, and when you're living in like 2007 and you're browsing like Amazon.com and eBay,
Hmm.
you become familiar with like the same type of foreign films coming up. So the next thing that I had taken a look into for the Asian market was Battle Royale,
Oh yeah.
and that movie really won me over. But
Hmm.
there was a gap between then and maybe the past like 4 or 5 years where I decided to check out the less exploitation-y
Hmm.
genres in Japanese film, and uh, one of the main filmmakers who caught my eye is the one we're talking about tonight, Takashi Kitano. I am a
Yes.
big fan of specifically his '90s work. I
Hmm.
have a box set somewhere behind me that I think Film Movement put out of Boiling Point, Sonatine, Hana-bi, and then I have a Japanese release of oh geez, what is it? Violent Cop, maybe?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So I am a I'm a big fan of his and just
Hmm.
his work as an artist in general and how he can manage being the lead actor of his films and also just fully control everything from a creative
Hmm.
aspect. I think that's very intriguing.
actor, director, and writer too. I know he wrote
Yes.
this one too as well. And it's really funny when you look at him because he came out of a stand-up comedy background to begin with,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
he was like doing like variety shows and that kind of thing. And then I think it was in the '90s when he just had this whole career change, and all of a sudden he's putting out all these movies that are winning all sorts of awards at film festivals and everything. So he's had a really interesting career, definitely.
Yeah, he's done a little bit of everything, it seems like.
Hmm.
And with this film, you even get to see his more like direct artistic side, where a
Yeah.
lot of the paintings in the film, or all of the paintings rather, are his own illustrations that he wound up doing after an accident that preceded the making of this movie.
Right.
Um, so yeah, he has a very interesting trajectory in general, going
Hmm.
from the comedy to lead star, and then fumbling into a directing position with Violent Cop, where
Hmm.
the original director of that, who did Battle Royale, had to
Oh,
bow
Kenji
out.
Fukasaku.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
He had to bow out for whatever reason, and then Takashi just decided to take it over. And then
Oh,
this
okay.
is what I think really winds up defining him as a famous person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know Fukasaku was the one who was supposed to direct that originally. Um, but yeah, I think my first introduction to him as an actor was Battle Royale. That was the first thing I
Yeah,
remember seeing Kitano in, and then as a director screenwriter, the first thing was Zatoichi, which we talked about at the end of at last season of this show. And you also mentioned something there. We touched on that too, when we talked about Zatoichi, was his motorcycle accident, which paralyzed part of his face apparently. So it's why
yeah.
he can't you do like a lot of facial reactions and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was while he was recovering that he started to get into painting, and he got into painting, and that kind of led him to make this movie.
Yeah, I did know. It didn't occur to me that the accident was the reason for like he. It seems like his facial expressions in this movie are a little more. Uh, they're less animated than
Hmm.
the earlier films, and I think that does come across in Hana-bi.
Yeah, it was something I never really like. I've always known he's got kind of that same expression, but I always thought that was just like a character choice with the types of characters he plays. I
Right.
had no idea that it was because of his accident. And then while preparing for this episode, I was reading up on it and saw that, he, like you said, he made all these paintings himself. And this was the first movie he made after the accident, and it was really kind of inspired by how he discovered his love of painting and everything.
Hmm. When we were initially talking about doing this episode, did you say that you hadn't seen Hanabi before, or you just hadn't utilized your Blu-ray or
No,
DVD?
this is the first time I've seen it. So yeah, I hadn't seen it before. And Yes, that's the thing. I mean, to be honest, it might be just one of those things where this might be one of those movies where you got to be in like the right frame of mind, you got to be in the right mood. But it didn't really do much for me, and that could be the fact that it was late at night. I had just finished working, so maybe I wasn't in the right state of mind to really kind of enjoy it.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's some nice things in it, but in general, it was a bit slow for me, and I couldn't really find myself really getting into it.
Yeah, it's definitely a different step within the same genre.
Hmm.
It seems like in so I think Violent Cop lands in '89, and then he winds up doing Sonatine, Boiling Point, and then you get this film where he's jumping back and forth between like Yakuza,
Hmm.
mob boss, criminal, and then cop, and it feels like the same movie that he's trying to like perfect the formula of when we get to like when we start from like Violent Cop, where we have like a seed of that,
Hmm.
and then something like Sonatine feels like, all right, this is the first real attempt of trying to get this story or this idea.
Right.
And then by the time we get to Hanabi, it feels much more reserved compared to
Hmm.
those other films.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
feels definitely more scaled back, and
Hmm.
I think more emotional than anything that
Definitely.
comes before it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like, I haven't seen Boiling Point or Violent Cop, but I have seen Sonatine, and yeah, it definitely felt like a much more reserved movie compared to that,
Yeah.
or even like his later stuff, like the Outrage trilogy, like definitely far more reserved. Whereas this one, it seems like he's more trying to make it for himself than anything else, and more
Hmm.
trying to find like a way to express himself after his accident. Whereas Outrage and is just more purely, just him having fun with the genre more than anything else.
What did you think of the Outrage movies? I've actually only seen the second Outrage film. I haven't seen the
Okay.
first one. But when I watched it, I was like, like it felt. I don't want to say it felt like a much more commercial version of
Mhm.
these earlier films, but I suppose that kind of is what it is because he had a
Yeah,
much bigger budget.
that was exactly what his intention was too. So
Hmm.
that's a totally fair assessment of him because he had said that I just kind of wanted to make a some commercial yakuza movies. So he just did this and he made these and it was just basically pure entertainment. And he's even said in interviews he's like there's no depth to these movies or anything. They're just me having fun basically.
Yeah.
But even still, I did notice there was some interesting commentary in them about like the role of yakuza and just like the dichotomy between the how they which you see in some of the other what was it in the Mimbo that was directed by Itami. That was also kind of the same thing where it was like pointing out the hypocrisy in the yakuza compared to how they claim to be versus how they actually act. And I saw a lot of that in Outrage, like with the backstabbing, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then when you get into the first two are really the best. I don't know I'd have to watch them again to like kind of really judge which one I like better, one or two. The third one was by then it started to feel like it was getting a bit tired.
Yeah. Hmm. I'll have to. There's still so much to his filmography that I haven't checked
Mhm.
out that follows this. Like I haven't even seen. It seems like every couple of years they try to throw him into a U.S. film or they try to make him a thing. Like the first attempt at that was Johnny Mnemonic, the Keanu Reeves
Yes,
movie.
yes. I'd seen that fairly recently because it was on Hulu, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd never seen it before, and you hear for years how terrible this movie is, and I'm like, oh, it can't be that bad. And then I watched, I'm like, no, no, yeah, it really is that bad.
It is, yeah, it's not good. Apparently, there's a Japanese version though that has way more Takashi Kitano in it.
Hmm.
That was part of his agreement to do that movie. Yeah, definitely not a good movie at all. I like some of
Yeah.
the aesthetics of it. It's very
Hmm.
cyberpunk, you know.
Yes,
So
that's
that's
actually
kind of
why I checked it out because I had just started playing the new Cyberpunk game, and then I spotted it on Hulu. I'm like, oh, let me give this a try now. So and
yeah,
yeah, it was a hour and a half that I'll never get back, basically.
yeah. And then I think the next time he winds up doing a U.S. film is his directorial effort, Brother, with Omar Epps. I haven't
Right.
seen that,
I
so I
haven't
can't
seen that,
really.
but it's one of the ones I picked it up, so I've got it. But I've heard it's it's kind of like the same reception that John Woo's American films get when you compare it to his Hong Kong films, where it just not wasn't really well received. And Kitano didn't have a good time making it. Like he'd said, like I did the Hollywood thing, and I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, yeah. John Woo did Face Off, didn't he?
He did Face Off, and he did a bunch more. He did the second Mission Impossible, and um, uh, Wind Talkers. He did that one.
Yeah.
Another Nicolas Cage one. Um, and I think he did some other stuff. But after Wind Talkers, I just never bothered watching any
Yeah,
other stuff after
yeah.
that.
Face Off is so ridiculous. I only watched
It
that movie
is.
for the first time this past year. I've watched so many movies because of the lockdowns.
Hmm.
And I got into that, and I also went into his better works like Better Tomorrow 1 and 2. I checked that out, really enjoyed it. And then most recently, Kitano was in The Ghost in the Shell. I refrained from calling it a remake. It's not like an adaptation, live action
Yeah,
adaptation.
yeah. I'd
And
call it more another adaptation because it's based all of them based off the original manga anyway. So.
yeah, and that one kind of suffers the same fate as Johnny Mnemonic, where it's like this is not a good movie. But I mean, they have some interesting visual aspects
Hmm.
to that. So
Yeah, that's another one I just haven't had any interest in watching because I do love the anime. We talked about that on the show as well. Um, and I'm not even a big anime fan, but that movie was just amazing. And I yeah, I just had ever since I heard that it was announced, just never really had any interest in it. And then when it came out and it just got panned, it just if it shows up on Netflix or HBO Max or whatever at some point, then I'll end up watching it. But I'm not going to go out of my way to rent it or anything.
yeah, yeah, that's probably the best way to
Mhm.
handle it. I mean, I knew I was in for something bad when like the ticket taker was like, "Oh, you're going to see that movie? Are you sure you don't want to see Baby Boss?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure I don't want to see Baby Boss." But yeah, that was the time, I guess.
Okay. All right. So what was your first memories of watching this film, and how does it kind of compare to how you feel watching it again now?
Well, I only recently got into Kitano's work as a director. The first one that I had checked out was Sonatine,
Hmm.
um, which I came across the imagery of him holding the gun to his head and
Hmm.
the little blood splurt, and I wound up deep diving into a lot of his '90s work from there. And I think so. I think I watched Hana-bi probably for the first time in 2019, so
Okay.
fairly
Fairly
recently.
recently. Yeah. Yeah.
This was my so the first time I watched it had my full attention. The second time I watched it, it was just kind of like playing on the TV, you know.
Hmm.
And then this time around, I give it my full attention again, just so I could come in like well prepped for the show. And you know, this go around, I think, had the strongest impact for me, just because I was able to absorb so much of the story, and
Hmm.
I also got a kick out of a lot of the comedy in this film,
Hmm.
because the comedy is extremely dry and it's
Yeah.
like physical comedy, and it's very masterful how he does certain things. It's very like Abbott and Costello, very Three
Hmm.
Stoogesy. Just the use of violence, not like lighter violence. This is actually fairly scaled back compared to other movies in terms
Compared
of
to
the
other stuff he's done, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
it
yes,
can still be pretty violent at times.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just I think I took a greater reception on this go around to those aspects, like him
Hmm.
throwing the ball or just like kicking the guy over while he's washing the car. Very funny stuff.
Yeah, it's just a funny way to start the movie, where just out of no it seems like just out of nowhere he smacks the guy down and starts kicking
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. It's very deceiving too, from like
Hmm.
where it begins and where it ends.
Yeah.
Uh, there's that aspect, I think, certainly in Sonatine and in Violent Cop and Boiling Point. I know you haven't seen it. That probably has the most comedy in it out of any of these four films,
Okay.
or at least like the most over the top. Anyway,
Hmm.
it's just very cartoonish at times.
Yeah. Also, even though it's not part of those four films you're talking about, but Zatoichi had a lot of comedy in it, and it was a I remember that being overall a really funny movie.
That's interesting. I would not expect that for Zatoichi for some
No, you
reason.
wouldn't. But and we, when we talked about Zatoichi, the guest on that episode is the guy who has studied like the entire Zatoichi series of films, and so it was interesting getting that perspective, because that was the only Zatoichi film I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And so I was curious, how does it compare to the series? Is it a faithful adaptation? And he was saying, he's like, yeah, it's actually pretty faithful to, despite the comedy and all that, and like the kind of approach Kitano did with like the bleach blonde hair and all that. He says it's actually a pretty faithful entry, and you can believe that it's the same character.
Hmm. I got to get around to checking that out. I'm not very familiar with the character in general. I just only have like a vague
Hmm.
knowledge of it, but I know there's tons of films to
Yeah,
dig
there's tons
into.
of films. I think there was a TV series at one point as well, and there have been films made since. But you don't really need to know any of that. Like it's kind of like Mad Max Fury Road in that way, where it just kind of it drops you in, it gives you everything you need to know, and you could just watch it standalone and not be lost at all.
Cool. I'll definitely have to check that out then.
And he definitely uses his and I didn't realize this until I found out doing the research for this, was because he wanted to use CGI blood in Zatoichi, and the reason he wanted is because he wanted very specific, he wanted to be able to control like how the blood lands and everything. And now after watching this and reading about the backstory for this and how it became, you can see why he decided to do that, because he was basically wanting to use the CGI blood as a way to like paint, essentially.
Hmm. That's very interesting.
Hmm.
He seems like a filmmaker who really does pay fine attention to the smallest aspects of his films, and I think that
Yeah.
certainly showcases itself in Hana-bi.
Hmm. So,
Um,
well, let's touch on some of that. Can you think of any specific examples that kind of jump out to you with that?
I think his handling of so this is definitely his first step into more surrealistic
Hmm.
or less linear cuts, and jumping between well, not jumping between timelines, but really going back in time and then showing you this little snippet of
Hmm.
something that's playing into what's happening in the current moment, and making you draw those conclusions on your own as to what's, what is the correct timeline of things. It feels like somebody's like foggy memory
Hmm.
at moments. Um, but just a lot of the visuals, seem like he's given a great amount of attention to the composition of things,
Yeah.
um, being strategic in what he shows and chooses
Hmm.
not to show. You don't really see a lot of the violence in this, with the exception of the gunshots when he's recollecting
Hmm.
his
Hori
two
Bay.
partners. Right? Yeah.
Hmm.
You only really hear it, and it's off screen, and then maybe you'll see some blood or you'll see the effect of that.
Hmm.
He's very stoic in this movie in particular, and yeah, I appreciate that kind of restraint.
And also the going along with the stoicness, the fact that he's pretty much wearing the sunglasses throughout the entire movie really helps do that as well. And and something I read is apparently he had said in interviews that Nishi kind of represents himself before his accident, and Horibe represents himself after. And so you can kind of see that, and especially with the stoicness of Nishi and the fact that he's hiding his eyes and kind of like, you can interpret that as kind of like, hiding aspects of himself. Whereas Horibe is much more honest about stuff, about things he's about the stuff he's
Right.
feeling. You can see he has these facial expressions. You can see his eyes the whole time. And I think that's something. I think that's one of those small details that definitely comes into play as well when you understand it in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. Question for you: have you seen the movie Audition?
Oh yes, I love Audition.
Is the is his buddy in this movie the lead actor from Audition? Because
Yes,
he looked
Renosuke.
extremely familiar. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I
it
had a
was
feeling.
funny. My wife and I were watching this last night, and I think it was she had mentioned it was Renosuke. I'm like, what? No way, because I did not recognize him at all because he's just so young in this movie.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I only got to see that for the first time somewhat recently. I decided to catch a revival screening of it
Hmm.
at this theater in Boston called the Brattle, and they were screening like a remastered print of it. Man, that was a great experience being able to see, that on the theater screen. And yeah, auditions.
Was that your first introduction to Takashi Miike?
No, I've seen one of his films from the early '90s.
Okay,
I think it's called Dead Alive or
Dead or
Dead or
Alive? Yeah,
Alive.
yeah.
So I've seen that, and I saw Itchy the Killer
Hmm.
back in the days where you'd have to order like a bootleg DVD of a foreign
Yeah.
film. So it wasn't like the best way to watch the
Hmm.
movie, and it kind of didn't hold my attention at the time. Um, so I'm only like very slightly
Hmm.
well versed on
Yeah.
him.
Well, Audition's definitely one of his best movies. So that was I'm glad you got a chance to watch that. I covered that back when I was doing solo episodes at the beginning of the show at the show, like back it was episode 6 it looks like. But yeah, that's one of those movies that, and people have probably people listening to the show are getting sick of me telling the story because I just talked about it in the last episode. But when I first time I watched that, I was in university and I was staying on campus for the weekend. Just wanted to have a night in, and so I ordered a pizza and I went to Blockbuster back when those actually existed and found Audition on the wall. It looked like a cheesy B movie from the cover and the description, so I thought it would be something to watch and like have a good laugh at. And it scared the crap out of me when I actually sat down and actually watched it.
Yeah, it's a terrific film, and for anybody that might be interested, I know they just did a like an audiobook version of it in English
Oh, okay.
recently of the novel, and
The
that was
original
actually
novel,
very
yeah.
good as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it was surprising because the original novel was not available in English for a while, even when the movie was, getting really popular and like they for some reason no publisher had thought to buy the rights to the novel. I don't know why. But and especially because that author had other novels that were already translated in English. So
Hmm.
it was kind of it was really strange. And then eventually I did end up finding a copy of it in Thailand of all places.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. The novel's fairly good as well, but
Yes.
I would definitely prefer the movie in this instance. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. The novel is good. It's it's not bad at all. But the movie it's one of those rare instances when the movie is better than the book.
Something that I found kind of interesting about Takashi Kitano's career around the time of this being released, like this, so this seems to be like the first movie that got Japanese audiences to take him seriously as a director.
Hmm.
It did win, was it the Golden Lion or the Golden Bear at Venice Film Festival in 1997?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm just double checking. But yeah, this yes, Golden Lion at the 54th Venice International Film Festival, and yeah, this was the. And it was not a, and it was. It's funny that because it was not successful financially at all, and it was only after he won the Golden Lion that people in Japan were like, oh, he can direct. But before that, they didn't really. They just thought his filmmaking was just like a hobby. They didn't think of it as something he was seriously doing.
And I believe this is also the film that initially got him familiar with like indie film snobs like myself
Oh,
back in
I
the 90s.
definitely believe that. Yeah, it seems to coincide perfectly with that the time when it came out, and I'm just double checking. What was his filmography? Was this this was after he made Sonatine? You said right?
Yeah, so Sonatine I think is what, like 90 or 91 around that time. It was maybe his third film, I want to say. I might be wrong about that.
Let's see. So yeah, I don't know. His third film was A Scene at the Sea, and then
Okay.
and that was in 91, and then Sonatine was in 93.
Got it. Okay.
And that was when people started to take notice of him because it was it got very popular in Europe and at the 93 at Cannes in 93. And then 90, well, he didn't make this until 97. He made a few
Yeah.
others since after the accident and then before making this one.
So something that I picked up because I also listened to the commentary on this film was that his original title, and this could have thrown everything out of whack for his directing career. He originally wanted to call this movie Kitano Volume 7, which you can't imagine this taking Venice by storm under the name Kitano Volume 7 or being like the big film that it wound up being for him. This was also, I believe, part of Quentin Tarantino's Rolling Thunder line of videotapes that he put out in the 90s, trying to get people familiar with foreign films. And I think that actually led to Sonatine getting released after this in the United States.
Because I remember when I bought, it was one of Tarantino's films. I can't remember which one it was, but it was like a dual pack, and they had might have been the first Kill Bill, I think, and they had Sonatine in there as a bonus movie, as a bonus disc on the.
Really?
Yeah. I want to say it was Kill Bill, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, it was really weird. Like I just opened the DVD case and then here's a Japanese movie too.
What's your opinion on Tarantino as a director?
I like him. Death Proof was a bit too slow for me, but in general, his movies are very enjoyable. Django Unchained and the first Kill Bill being probably my favorites, and Jackie Brown is amazing as well, I think. But some of the other stuff, like the movies are very fun when I watch them, and I like his ear for dialogue. But and some of them they'll affect, like I'll get bored of them and then I'll put them away for a while and then I watch them again. I'm like, oh, this is actually really good. I forgot about that. And then like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I didn't really like it the first time I saw it. It just didn't really grab me in any way. But then I watched this the second time around, though. I really enjoyed it a lot more.
Yeah, that's one that I feel gets better as you like marinate on it.
Yes,
because
definitely.
When I watched it, I liked it, and now I'm on like maybe my third viewing of it. It might be my favorite Tarantino film.
Okay.
And I'm just curious. So you would say Kill Bill is probably your favorite of the?
Probably, yeah. I'd go back and forth between Kill Bill and Django Unchained.
Yeah, I think Django Unchained is very underrated.
Yes,
nobody
definitely.
really talks about that in his filmography nowadays. People seem to. I mean, he's kind of you know, online opinions are one thing. It seems
Hmm.
like he's fallen out of fashion with a lot of like the film
Hmm.
talkers, online, but I think he's always great. And his later career of making these big novelesque movies that are unlike anything from the 90s,
Hmm.
are spectacular.
Yeah, I like that he's just kind of embraced the fact that he's making genre films. I really, because
Yeah.
I'm a big genre guy myself, so so that it's been very enjoyable. Like, Hateful Eight, I didn't enjoy as much. It
Yeah, it was
was,
kind of boring. That was
yeah, it was a little bit slow, and then I know they had the like extended version, which is like a ended up being turned into like a 4-hour miniseries on Netflix, and I haven't had the patience to go through and watch that yet.
Yeah, that's not a movie that really needs any more time added to
Hmm.
it, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Well,
It's
I'm
not
glad
bad, but
it's not bad, no, but I'm glad because everybody else I know talks about how Hateful Eight is their favorite Tarantino movie. So you're the first person
really.
I know who kind of has the same opinion as me on it.
Oh my God, I've
Yeah,
never heard that opinion once in my life.
really. Oh
Hateful
wow.
Eight, yes, yeah. So that's shocking to me.
Maybe
Um,
it's just the crowd I'm mostly associate because it's a lot of other genre guys who are especially love what have a big soft spot for westerns.
yeah,
So
yeah, and
that might definitely has something to do with it, I think.
that movie feels. I mean, all of his movies kind of feel like a love letter to past films,
Oh
but
yeah,
that one in
yeah.
particular, I would say, just bringing in like Ennio Morricone to do the
Hmm.
score and all that, feels like that. Um, but to tie it back to Kitano, I feel like the farther we also get away from like a lot of people revere the 1970s as like the
Hmm.
golden age for filmmaking, for
Right.
independent film. And I feel like as we get farther away from the 1990s, there's starting to have that vibe to it with all the independent filmmakers that came out of that decade
Hmm.
and all the interesting films that were brought up essentially through that,
Yeah.
between Tarantino and Kitano and so many other people.
Well, yeah, because that generation, like, well, you seem to be about the same age. Like our generation, when we were growing up, like those are the movies we grew up with. Just like the '90s film directors, the movies they grew up with was the stuff in the '70s. So you had
Yeah,
Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez and all them riffing on Scorsese and the black exploitation films and the spaghetti westerns and all that kind of stuff.
right. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I really do feel like the 90s is probably like the last great decade
Mm-hmm.
for good small to mid budget, uh, personal violent films,
Mm-hmm.
especially.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see now that with there's so many different options for distribution and streaming now, and so now that that generation is now starting to take up the reins and start making movies on their own as well. It'd be interesting
Mhm.
to see like if we kind of see a resurgence of that, like in the streaming markets or something.
Well, it's interesting because now everything is probably going to wind up going to streaming at least a lot faster than it used to. I
Yeah.
know with HBO Max, they're doing like limited streaming windows of theatrical releases because nobody's really able to get out to the theater
Yeah.
now.
I've been
Um,
loving that because I'm in Japan, so I'd usually have to wait until like usually it takes like 3 months for a movie to come out here unless it's something really big budget.
mhm.
Um like the Marvel movies or something like that. But so like a lot of these films that are coming out now, I get to watch them on HBO Max, and I would not have been able to watch them. Like I got to see just the other night I watched Judas and the Black Messiah, which was amazing.
I haven't checked that out yet. I watched The Little Things recently, but I'm going to be checking that
Yeah, I
out.
watched that. I did not did not
Not
enjoy that
impressed?
one. No, no. I mean, I
Yeah.
thought Denzel Washington's always entertaining, and
Mhm.
I thought Jared Leto did a pretty good job. He was definitely suitably creepy in that, but overall, it just kind of felt like it felt like a poor man's Seven, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with that assessment. And I've been thrilled with HBO Max. I'm not really impressed by like Netflix's slate
Mhm.
of original movies. They kind of just feel like conveyor belt products that
Yeah,
you
and
forget about
like
them.
I still subscribe to Netflix, but they've definitely disappointed me. But some of their more like the documentary stuff they do is a little bit more
Yeah,
interesting.
that's
That
definitely where they shine.
Yeah, yeah. Although HBO Max has given them a run for that as well, because I watched the Nexium documentary series, which is really well done.
Yeah, I've heard that's great.
Yeah.
But to the point I was getting at before, so we've had like so many big blockbusters with
Mhm.
massive budgets coming out to theaters. But now that everything is going to streaming, that's going to, I think, allow for smaller budget movies to get made and hopefully more interesting projects that
Mhm.
are something similar like the past.
Yeah, it's kind of tough right now because it's in this there's this weird growing pain situation where the the only movies that really get released theatrically now are like the either small budget art house films or like really big budget movies, and like it the mid budget ones they're kind of floundering around. They don't really know what to do with them yet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I don't. I mean, who knows if there's even really an audience for that for the
Mm-hmm.
theater anyway at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like the cultural palette of film goers, at least in the West, has changed so much over like the past 10, 15 years,
Mm.
especially. Which I think Dark Knight is probably responsible for that. Being such like a big, massive hit,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely impacted the way that the film studios have selected which projects to greenlight and creating these shared universe movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I know. I think it's probably also in Japan as well because streaming is came late out here, but it is starting to get more popular now. But even still, like I mean, the video rental stores we still have those here, and they're still popular enough. They still do enough business to stay open. So, so I definitely think that's probably the case out here as well, especially because movie tickets in Japan cost like $20 a pop.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
yeah. That I've only been to Japan once, but that was something I had such a great appreciation for
Mm-hmm.
was not neglecting physical media
Mm-hmm.
like record stores
Mm-hmm.
and people buying CDs or,
Right. Right.
or
Yeah.
Blu-rays and whatnot. That's harder and harder to come by
Yeah.
in the
I think
U.S.
a
now.
big part of the reason, just because Japan's been so slow to adopt like a computer technology in general, like in the home. It wasn't until internet people could get the internet on their phones that Japan really started getting on the internet. But
Hmm,
like even now, lots of homes don't have PCs or anything like that. So
that's wild. I didn't know that at all.
oh
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of, and I know this. I've got students who they have to when they have to type up an assignment or something like that, they have to check out a computer from the school or use the school's computer lab or something.
Oh wow.
Mhm.
So the IT industry must be thriving then to be able to yeah, help people that maybe aren't as well versed
Oh,
as
probably,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm always seeing job openings for technology sector jobs, and just because they just do not have enough people to do those jobs.
Yeah, I bet.
So back to this movie. One of the things that I thought was interesting in this was the title, right? Hana-bi,
Yeah.
which means fireworks, but also the spelling of it in and I'm not sure if they did this in the Jap, but they really tried to make sure to emphasize the separation between because the characters Hana is flower and B is fire, so you combine
Hmm.
them, you get fireworks. Um, and they really try to separate it. When I see it, like if you look at the English language releases of this, the cover they have Hanabi is hyphenated,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
it normally wouldn't be when you read it in Japanese.
That yeah. That I mean that seems to play upon a couple of different aspects of the
Mm-hmm.
movie. It's also just a much more interesting sounding title. To I mean,
Mm-hmm.
nowadays it's been released in the U.S. as Hana-bi. I
Yeah,
think when it was originally released, they just went with the direct translation, which was Fireworks, which is
right.
not an exciting title at all.
In
It's
fact, I
very
think if I'm not mistaken, the version I watched last night, which my copy ended up getting screwed up and there weren't any subtitles on it, so I
oh
had to.
no.
But fortunately, it was on Tubi, had it for free, so I was able to watch it there. And they do use in the opening credits. It's like titled. I think it's titled Hanabi and then subtitled Fireworks.
Hmm. Yeah. It's definitely. I do feel like if it had gotten strictly labeled fireworks in the U.S., maybe it would certainly do it a disservice. It would have
Mm-hmm.
people maybe not giving it a second thought. Uh,
Well, I think it also may
it's
have given people the wrong impression of it, and that kind of happened with me too, because I was expecting just knowing about Sonatine and just like the Outrage series, and this is a movie where he plays an ex-cop. And there's Yakuza involved in it. Like
right.
I had expected something that was a lot more action packed, a lot more
More
violent,
gunfights,
more gunfight stuff like that.
more
Yeah,
blood.
yeah,
But that's really not the case at all. I think probably the
right.
most violent scene, aside from that flashback, is probably toward the end where they're trailing him still, and they,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you've got the punk that shows back up even though he warns them,
Hmm.
and he steps into the car and takes care of everybody.
Hmm.
And the way that Kitano does violence is really like no other director I've seen,
Hmm.
where it's all very minimalist. Like he's both a minimalist and a maximalist in different facets of his filmmaking, but especially in the violence, where it's just like it's a very stripped down gunfight, and
Hmm.
I also feel like that's the case with, it might be Sonatine, also where there's a bar sequence where he's firing and people are just like standing there and just
Hmm.
like there's no excitement at all. There's no energy in them. You don't really see that with anybody else
No,
handling
no, yeah.
that. So that's definitely something I really like about him, that I think is one of his hallmarks.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I like the use of going back to the title as well, the use of firework, or if you look at it, flower and fire, it really kind of, like you said, it does have these, it has that another meaning, just like Shin Godzilla did this too, because if you look at the, because Shin is the you think the title Shin Godzilla, New Godzilla, is what it was you think it would be, but they specifically did not use any of the kanji characters for
Hmm.
Shin. But Shin has a lot of different meanings, so they just wrote it in phonetically instead, so that you could interpret it different ways. Like it could be interpreted as like new, it could be interpreted as divine, or it could be interpreted in many different ways. And so I think that was a really clever way. And I think they do kind of the same thing here, where they have, it's called Hana-bi, but it's like, it's not so much about fireworks, but it's more about the combination of flowers and fire.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually did try to look up what Shin Godzilla meant somewhat recently, and
Mhm.
I got a very poor translation that just came out like God Godzilla,
Yeah, yeah,
and I was
yeah.
just like, what is so what does this mean? They're making Shin Ultraman, right?
Yes,
This
yeah,
next
same
year.
director. Yeah,
I'm
they just released a trailer of it actually a few weeks ago, I think.
I haven't seen the trailer yet. I've only seen screenshots from it, but
Mhm.
I am very intrigued to see how that comes out. That
Yeah, because I really enjoyed Shin Godzilla, and definitely on par with the very first Godzilla movie. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with Ultraman.
Yeah, that one I did. I mean, I don't know what the big like award ceremony for film in Japan is, but that one like Best Picture for whatever that is, didn't it?
Something like that, yeah. Just double checking here. I believe because there is like the Japan Academy Awards and Japan Academy Prize. That's what it's called. And yeah, it won 7 awards, including Picture of the Year and Director of the Year.
Hmm.
And it was the highest grossing of the Godzilla films that were produced by Japanese companies.
Yeah, that is one that I really enjoyed, and I'm only selectively educated on the
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla films, because there's so many of them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and a lot of the ones after the first, and a lot, it's like between those that there's not a whole. There's they really kind of play up the campiness. I know in the '80s they started to become more. They took a more serious turn, but yeah, it's really it's from everything I've heard, and we talked about. I talked about it on the show. I think it was like season one of the seasons we talked about it, and the guest we had on had recently watched like all the Godzilla films, so he was able to
oh
give some
wow.
insight into like how it compares to the other ones and also to the American ones as well.
Yeah, that Matthew Broderick one.
Oh, God.
That's like the first Godzilla movie I ever got excited about because I was a little kid at the time.
That
So
was the first one I saw for the longest time. That was the only Godzilla movie I saw up until they finally released the original Japanese version, uncut and unedited, and then I watched that one. I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it.
yeah, yeah, people really have a distaste for that. I'll tell you what, maybe it's just my nostalgia. I don't think that one is as bad as the more recent Godzilla films. Even
Really?
though, yes, in entertainment value. Let me
Okay.
clarify that. I definitely think that the more recent ones that were made, like with Bryan Cranston and
Mhm.
I forget who's in the second one, but those are certainly maybe more well made
Mhm.
and have a tighter script to them, and the performances are better.
Hmm.
But I think just as far as like monster movies go,
Hmm.
that 96 or 97 or 98, whenever it came out,
Yeah,
is
something like that.
even though it has aspects of it that are complete rip-offs of Jurassic Park, I think it's a
Hmm.
very entertaining film. It probably would have been serves better if it wasn't called Godzilla. If it was just
I think
some,
so. Yeah.
yeah, then I think it would probably have gotten much less hate.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some truth to it. I did try. It was on Netflix, I think, like last year or something, and so I did sit down and rewatch it. And me coming in without any experience with the Godzilla when I first saw it, like I still hated it. So
Yeah, yeah. I can't imagine it has held up well, or the special effects are very impressive at
no,
this
definitely
point.
not. No, I mean the special effects aren't bad. As I'm thinking back, they didn't jump out to me as being like too obviously bad. I mean they're
Mhm.
mostly pretty decent, especially for late '90s.
Yeah. Also, similarly, wasn't Battle Royale at least nominated for Best Picture when it came out?
I believe so. It may have won something.
Hmm.
But yeah, Battle Royale, and I've talked about this on the show as well. Like that for me is probably the best Japanese movie ever made.
Really?
Yes,
Hmm.
I go so far as to say that just because um, there is so much there's just so much commentary on Japanese society. It's one of those movies that when I first watched it before I came to Japan, I thought, "Oh, this is good. This is good. This is entertaining." And then I read the novel, and the novel was amazing as well. So
Yeah, the novel's
yeah,
great. Yeah. I haven't checked out the manga at all
I read the
or
manga.
any of that.
It was okay. It wasn't bad, but it was it was extreme in ways that it didn't have to be. And I'm
Hmm.
talking like like some of the characters and just like the way they were drawn. It was just like it took away from. It was very much in a manga style, as like like you'd see in like the teenage manga type stuff, where it's like where these characters there's no way you buy them as 15 years old in the manga.
Right. I gotcha.
Yeah, and that kind of detracted from just how impactful the novel and the movie both were. But yeah, when after being in Japan and living here for several years, I and when I started teaching my class in Japanese film, I decided to teach Battle Royale one day. So I sat down and I rewatched it, and it just blew me away that after being here for so long, because I really could see like all the stuff Fukasaku was saying about Japanese society, and it was just much more powerful than I expected. When I teach in class, like I told him I could teach like a week long series of lectures because there's so much crammed in there.
Hmm. What is your preferred cut of the movie?
I like the one that has the I think it's the special. I haven't seen the 3D theatrical re-release, but the special edition is the one I have, where it has like the 8 extra minutes of scenes in it. And so that's probably the one I prefer, because it expands on the characters, and especially Kitano's relationship with um, Noriko as well, and it kind of gives you
Yeah.
a sense that he's more of a character than just like, as compared to the novel, where you had the guy who was just straight up sociopath, no redeeming qualities.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is something that I did notice was fleshed out, because I have one of the early like Arrow box
Mm-hmm.
sets of Battle Royale that gives you the theatrical directors, and then I think like a third cut of the movie. And I think I do prefer the director's cut that fleshes out
Mm-hmm.
some of that and embraces some of the more surrealist aspects that
Yeah.
were diced down for the movie. Uh,
Right.
Something that it just occurred to me while I was watching Hana-bi last night. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Columbo at all, or have watched that at
I
all.
mean, I know of it. I'm not. If I ever watched it, it was when I was a kid, and I
Hmm.
don't really remember it. Just because, and I'm sure I probably did, because it was like there were tons of cop shows that I remember watching as a kid with my dad. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't really have any strong memories of Columbo specifically.
I was. Anyway, it's just completely off point anyway. But I was thinking to myself that Kitano could play like if they ever adapted Columbo for a Japanese audience, he would
Mm.
be a spectacular pick for that. Um,
Okay.
and it would probably be within his wheelhouse because he plays
Mm.
cops in like half of his films. So
Yeah, yeah. Cops and Yakuza, basically like his two
Yeah,
recurring roles and everything.
yeah,
It almost now gets to the point where I see him in a movie and he's not playing a cop or a Yakuza. I'm kind of surprised.
yeah. He's got a movie I've been meaning to check out. This might actually be the next Kitano film I watch. That's just called, I believe it's just called Takashi's, and he plays two versions of himself, and it's
Oh, I've heard of
very meta.
this. Yeah, I've heard of this. I haven't seen it, but I definitely heard of it.
I think it got mixed to like negative reviews, but
Hmm.
I'm just interested in seeing like specifically him directing himself in
Hmm.
a framework that isn't cops and criminals, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Takeshi's, yeah. It came out in
Mhm.
2005. And uh, so yeah, it's kind of like an autobiographical style movie and a lot of surrealism, it says. And um, but yeah, it doesn't seem to. It said it was didn't really seem to really get a whole lot of, like, I'm looking here and it doesn't say there's a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of, under the reception area.
Mhm. Question for you.
Mhm.
So you noted that with Hana-bi, this movie really didn't quite do it for you as say
Mhm.
like Sonatine did.
Right, yeah.
Um, could you give or expound on that a little bit?
Not really, because it's been like 15 years since I've seen Sonatine, so I'd have to
Hmm.
rewatch it again to really kind of. But I just remember, so I'm just going off of vague memories from when I first saw it, and
Sure.
um, but yeah, I just remember liking Sonatine a lot more. And like I said, a big part of it was probably just the state of mind I was in when I watched this movie, because I just finished work at like 8 o'clock at night, and then made dinner and just sat down to eat and then started watching this. So I just don't think I was in the right frame of mind for it. I think if I watched it again, I might enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, Sonatine is a much more fun film.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
seems very hung up on going to the beach in his movies.
I was thinking that too. Like, there was a lot of scenes in here. I'm just like, and I was thinking like at the beach scenes. I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, didn't I see this in Sonatine?
Yes, he does. He does it in his other films too, where he'll just like find an excuse for the characters to go to the beach,
Hmm.
and then that'll wind up being part of the ending. It's just we
Hmm.
got to spend 40 minutes hanging out at the beach, doing having fun stuff
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
This one ends on a much more depressing note, obviously, compared to a lot of what happens in Sonatine.
Right, yeah.
I kind of had this go around. I had an alternative theory, and I don't think this is the implication at all,
Hmm.
but it was just a thought that came to mind that maybe with this ending, um, the girl on the beach is supposed to be. So the character has suffered a loss
Hmm.
with his wife, where they lost their daughter due to some disease, and I believe the wife has leukemia,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she's going to pass away soon.
Hmm.
Uh, did it kind of feel like the ending might have been either like in his head or at least partially fabricated reality, where they see the little girl on the beach who's playing with the kite, who I believe is also Takashi Kitano's real life daughter.
Oh, okay.
Um, After the cops find the bodies of the Yakuza he's killed,
Hmm.
not far from what seems like a resort where they're staying.
Hmm.
And then you hear the two gunshots, which is his life ending and his wife's life ending.
Right. The
Did you?
implication being the Yakuza caught up to him.
Yeah. Or well, what I got from that was that he killed himself and his wife.
That could, because there's also that focus on the suicide characters, right?
Hmm.
The Japanese characters for suicide. There's a lot. They linger on that a lot,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. Um, um, I don't know. I think I'd probably have to watch it again to kind of really form a solid opinion one way or the other. But I think it could definitely be read that way, especially when
Yeah.
they keep focusing on the suicide characters that pop up, and also when you think about, it's a contrast to Noribe, because he's thinking about suicide, and then it's this art. When he starts painting, that's what pulls him out of it.
Hmm.
And whereas Nishi doesn't seem to have anything else going for him in life after he stops being a cop.
Right. Yeah. So I will say one of the strengths of this movie in particular is that I think it's a much better romance film
Hmm.
than it is a crime film.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
which is probably intended,
Mhm.
but that was another thing I think I grasped on this viewing, as opposed to when I initially watched it and the second time that I had checked it out. That's definitely
Mhm.
the strength of the movie, and it becomes, or at least it feels like it becomes a totally different film in the last 30 or 40 minutes
Yeah,
where it
yeah.
focuses on that.
No, I think so too. It's definitely not what I expected,
Mm,
based on the other Kitano stuff I've seen, and just based on the the stuff I'd read, like the synopsis and everything. It was very different from what I expected it to be.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I would definitely say give it another watch
Mhm.
if you get the chance. Maybe with the subtitles working right as well. You know.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll have to give it a watch. Like I think I'll probably let it sit for like a month or so, and then maybe I'll rewatch it and see how I feel about it again. But anyway, any um any other things you wanted to mention about the movie?
Uh, Off the top of my head, no. No, I think I basically covered a lot of my thoughts on Hana-bi specifically.
Mhm.
I do think it's one of the stronger entries in Kitano's '90s career.
Mhm.
Anyway, um, it's definitely a more, I think, crystallized effort of what he seems to be
Mhm.
trying to do around that time.
Coming at it
Where
from the perspective of a director, is there
Mhm.
anything that really kind of jumps out to you?
Again, just like that hyper focus on some of the smaller details of the film that a lot of people
Mhm.
I don't think would have given much attention to, or maybe would have indulged in a little too heavily.
Mhm.
Um, Again, just showing restraint as far as the violence goes, and being selective about what is communicated to the viewer on
Mhm.
the screen. And I do think that this is definitely, I think, the most, or one of the more intellectually stimulating movies that he produces in this time span,
Okay.
because it does require you to piece things together and
Mhm.
figure out, you know, where things are going to lead and what is actually the real core of this story.
Right, right. Okay. All right, great. So Lowres, if there's anything else you wanted to promote or any other final things you wanted to say before we close up?
Uh, no, I'm good. Just lowreswonderbread.net. I'll have my website up and running if you want to follow me on Instagram, lowreswonderbread as well. That's the only
Okay.
social media platform I enjoy anyway.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right. Okay. Well, Lowres, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been
absolutely.
great talking with you about Kitano and just kind of film in general. So definitely a fun conversation. We'll have to have you come back at some point in the future.
I'd be happy to. You have some good movies on that list of films to cover, so I'll definitely check it out. And anytime, just ask.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. So that does it for this episode of Japan on Film. Thanks so much for watching. Let me just take a quick see what we got coming up next. So next week, we're going to be talking about Swing Girls with Ashley, returning guest. So come here, listen to us talk about that. And until then, japanonfilm.com is the website, and Japan on Film on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, all those places you can find us. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. For watching this episode of Japan on Film. For more of our videos, just hit the subscribe button.